welcome into another episode of Steelers Afternoon Drive. I'm Zachary Smith. We warned you guys yesterday that this was going to happen. It is Farabaugh Friday here on Steelers Afternoon Drive. Yet again, Nick Farabaugh joining the show. What's going on, pal?
What's going on, man? We're doing well here on a Friday. Sunny out in the Berg, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Not too
It is
hot either. It's not, the crazy summer heat yet. Yet. That's coming
pretty,
next
pretty
week.
pretty solid. Pretty solid. Yeah, I would say 72 right now.
Mini camp though
Where's
next week, man. Mini camp next week is about to be sweltering. And by the way, they are practicing in the afternoon, like
yeah.
a normal training camp. Like
That
practice.
last day is looking rough right now.
Yeah.
If this holds up.
It's gonna be like a normal training camp. I guess I can't say normal training camp practice anymore, Smitty, because they changed the training camp schedule this
Yeah.
year. They're going to be practicing in
Mhm.
the morning most days this year,
Mhm.
which is interesting. I wonder how that's going to work. They used to do a bunch of walkthrough before practice in the morning, and then they would do uh, practice about 2 hours later. So are they doing walkthrough at like 7 a.m. now, or are they
Mm,
doing it after practice? I don't know.
I don't know. I wonder if the players even know that information right now.
I don't know, but regardless, they're practicing at 10:30 on most days.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
I'm
I wonder
interested.
if that will. You think that'll impact attendance for it at all?
I think it might actually raise attendance
Okay.
a little bit. It's gonna be less hot. If you've ever been out there,
Mhm.
there's no cover in
Yeah.
in that area. So it's not gonna be sweltering like it would be at 3:30 in the afternoon. Because some days, man, it can get absolutely crazy.
Sure.
I also think it gives them some flexibility to change practice times now because before when it would rain during practice they would have to just move it, but now maybe if you have a 10:30 schedule, it rains earlier, maybe you could get out there at 1:30 again or whatever.
Mhm.
I'm interested to see why they decided to change it. I don't it's interesting. They've changed a few things this year. OTAs are are formatted a little differently this year too. I'm interested to see where that came from. Is maybe Arthur Smith's influence? As a head coach,
I don't know.
maybe.
I wonder if you could go back and look at like in Atlanta what theirs was
Yeah,
structured like and see. Yeah.
I would be
Mm.
interested. I don't know, but having another head coach on the staff, a former head coach, is probably something that's interesting to Mike Tomlin. Maybe maybe they have a new strength and training staff. Maybe there's some studying there. I don't know. I'm interested to
Mm.
see because we're going to talk to Mike Tomlin next week at mandatory minicamp, and I'm interested to kind of see why he switched it up. There's just a lot different this year. The practice structure, like at OTAs, man, like the individual periods were like 35 minutes long this year. Last year they were 15. We had a lot more team last year. Not as much team this year. It's kind of interesting.
Gotcha. Okay, well, Nick, Alan and I talked yesterday, kind of he recapped basically what his OTA takeaways were, bigger picture, and then smaller, kind of talked about like certain positional groups, kind of resetting where the roster's at, what positions you maybe could still see competition for from now until the end of training camp, what spots were up for grabs, that type of stuff. And I'm sure that you got some different opinions. So I kind of want to go through and maybe not like hopefully gloss over the same stuff again, but maybe get some stuff from you that you felt was different, other than we just talked about maybe the structure of the OTAs in general being a bit different from they are in the past. What was like your big takeaway from OTAs in general?
My big takeaway from OTAs. That's an interesting question. Hmm. The offense is definitely going to take a lot of time to get rolling.
Okay.
That's one of the
What's
takeaways.
interesting, so his was about Arthur Smith's offense as well, but it wasn't necessarily where you're going with this. So I like
So
this.
yeah, there's a lot different in Arthur Smith's offense. The route trees are different. Like Pat Frymouth, for example, talked about this with me about how he's running a full wide receiver route tree as a tight end, basically. Guys like George Pickens are running fuller route trees. Running backs have a much different route tree. Like they have angle routes and wheel routes in this offense. It's interesting to actually see. So I mean, that's something that's different. The motion's different. You know, they play inside out. They play out of condensed sets, and they use motion at the snap to get free releases. They do different things like that. So you see a lot more Shanahan McVay ish stuff in that mold. But the biggest thing I was like watching the whole time was this is going to take time to get meshed together. It really is.
Mhm.
Um, the offense just looked sloppy at times. I mean, it really did. And again, you're installing a new offense. You have 3 new quarterbacks. You have multiple new wide receivers, 2 new offensive linemen that are mixing in. They're both rookies on top of that. I get it. So it happens. So there's just a lot to work together, but there was miscommunication, drops, just it was all over the place. I mean, the defense, which is clearly has less movement. Really, the defense in the first team has 3 new players in it, which is Don
Mhm.
Deshaun Elliott and Patrick Queen, and that's really not that crazy. The depth chart down, on defense isn't crazy different either. So, the second team guys have been here for a year, like Darius Rush and Corey Trice, or KZ and Trenton Thompson, or you know E-Rob and all of these guys have been here. D-line is completely unchanged, basically. So
Mhm.
they are rolling, and they're going to be fine. But this offense, I'm guaranteeing you, the first week of training camp, everyone's going to be talking about how bad the offense looks. I'm 100% guaranteeing it because
Yeah.
it's just going to take longer for that unit. There's so much continuity that they have to build, chemistry that they have to build. It is significant in what they have to do. So that was one of my big takeaways. So, like, when I'm talking offensive standouts and stuff or whatever, it's hard. You kind of have to see it through the forest because the forest this is a completely new offense with so much different personnel. And they're gonna
Mhm.
take a while to get together. And I think I talked about this with you, Smitty, when we were talking about schedule release and stuff. How, like, I thought even in the early goings, like, I think this could linger into the season. Like, I just think there's so much new that sometimes
Mhm.
it takes a while to get going.
I was just saying, so sometimes for me, I get lost on where I said this at. I record 8 podcasts a week, Nick. 6 of them are Steelers podcasts. So I'd like it's hard for me to keep track of when I said things and what I said them on. But I know for sure that I put this take out there when the schedule came out, and everybody was like complaining about that gauntlet on the back end. I was like, guys, if you're gonna have to play these teams anyway, why not? Why would you rather not have them on the back end when hopefully the offense has more continuity? Because I expect them to be slow out of the gate, like you're saying. Like I didn't have an issue with it. I thought it was very odd that we didn't play any divisional opponents until after the bye week, starting in week 11. And then, of course, they have KC mixed in there as well. But like, I'm not upset about it for that reason. Like, by that time, you have kind of the offensive pieces gelling more so than obviously you will have them at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, like, they're gonna have time together, and, that's probably a big part of the reason when we're talking about, the pole position stuff with Russell Wilson and Justin Fields.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably a big part of the reason why Russell Wilson is kinda dominating those reps right now, and we talked about, Alan and I did in practice report. I'm sure Alan talked about on here too yesterday. That Fields kind of mixed in a little bit yesterday specifically,
Mm-hmm.
where he was, he's throwing to Pickens and Jefferson and the first teamers more than he was before. Um, but they need continuity at some point. Like they need to, during this 1 month off, they're gonna have to get together and all these guys are gonna have to figure out chemistry together, and they're gonna need some time to build together. So having a definite quarterback, at least through minicamp, is going to be really important for them just to build the necessary pieces, the chain link to get ready for week 1, because I expect them to play a lot in the preseason too. I think they have to. They just need time, man. They need time.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and I'm in full agreement with that, and I think all of this makes for what I think is going to be really interesting. I feel like I say it every year, but every year it feels more and more true. I'm actually like I'm normally not somebody that gets super excited about the preseason, but I just think there's so much to actually like look for in the preseason this year. Like I think there's gonna be a lot of jobs very much up for grabs throughout the preseason and guys that need to separate themselves from the pack. So in what is typically like meaningless games from a result standpoint, sure as hell isn't going to be meaningless for the players.
Yeah, I don't think so either. And they face some pretty good teams. I think that will help. Houston, what is it? Houston, Buffalo, and
Buffalo,
Detroit.
I believe Detroit, yeah.
So I mean, those are 3 playoff teams from a year ago. So
Mhm.
that hopefully can help them a little bit. They need it, man. I think my other big takeaway from it was this team needs another wide receiver. I mean, I know that's pretty obvious, but that was a huge takeaway to me. Like nothing changed in my view of that. George Pickens looks great still. I think Pickens actually might take it to another level this year. He looks fantastic. It's not going to matter if there's no one else to threaten them on the other side. They're just going to double and triple team him. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what's going to be. Pat Frymuth, I think's due for a big year, so I think that's going to be part of the solution. But they need someone else. I've been impressed by guys like Calvin Austin. I really think Calvin Austin has a chance to be a legitimate
Alan
threat.
said the same, and we actually got a question about Calvin Austin. So I
Yeah,
think that there's just been a lot of buzz surrounding him through OTAs.
he's he's creating separation more than any other receiver at these OTAs. Full disclosure, George Pickens wasn't here for about 2/3 of them, so that's what I'm basing this off of. When Pickens has been here, Pickens has been the clear best number one. But Calvin Austin has been, man, he looks great. I mean, he's separating, he's got a full route tree, he's catching everything, throwing his way, winning at all three levels. I mean, he looks like a guy that can contribute to this offense. So I'm really interested in him. But outside of that, I think Van Jefferson, Quez Watkins, Scotty Miller, all those guys have kind of met your expectations for what they were on film. Roman Wilson's had a tough go of things.
Yeah, we talked about that a bit yesterday too. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think from a retention standpoint, I think he knows the playbook, and I think,
Mhm.
that's good. It's not a playbook retention issue. I just think the NFL, even in practice, is quicker, faster, stronger. It's an adjustment period. So you're seeing it. He's just kind of going through it right now. So
Yeah. I don't wanna piggyback off everything that Alan says. Obviously, you're your own person, you got your own set of eyes and ears that you're going through and making your own observations. But I just wanted to get your thought on a take because, yesterday when we were having that conversation, Alan was like, "I know that the fans' alarm is gonna go off when they hear that Roman Wilson is struggling," but he also wanted to add this caveat that, like, he would have said the same thing about Joey Porter Jr. last season at
yeah,
this time.
100%. Trice was better than Joey Porter Jr. in OTAs last year. And obviously we know how Joey Porter Jr. ended up playing, so it didn't really matter much. Um, that was something last year that stuck out like a sore thumb. Joey was getting beat, man, by like third stringers, guys that didn't even make the practice squad. So
Mm.
he came a long way. So it's very early.
Yeah, they get better
So
quick this time of year,
yeah,
rookies,
it's
yeah.
it's very early, and this is his first non-practices in the NFL. That's something to consider. Even if you are a guy that played in the national championship and played at Michigan and played Ohio State, played all these big schools, it's still an adjustment. Like it really is. So if unless you're coming from the SEC where that's as close as it gets, it's going to be a jump, and even for the SEC guys, it's a jump. So
Mhm,
I think Roman's, figuring it out right now. He's kinda, you know, he's battling. I will say one other thing that'll the competitive matchup with Roman Wilson has been Beanie Bishop, and Beanie Bishop has had a really good 9 practices at OTAs,
mhm.
doesn't get beat very often, has had some really nice PBUs, and we haven't even seen the part where, he's this fiery, blitzing firecracker off the edge that was fearless and willing to do whatever. We'll see that in training camp when the pads come on, and I'm really excited to see what he can do it in the preseason too. But Beanie Bishop, man, has had a nice camp. Um, Alan and I both were in agreement on this. We think he's been the best rookie so
Mm.
far, and that's not counting like Fautanu and Frazier and McCormick and Peyton Wilson because I keep saying it. How in the world are you going to evaluate offensive line play and
Yeah,
line?
the guy's playing patty cake right now. Yeah.
They're basically what they're doing. So,
Mhm.
I'm not including those guys, but I think Beanie's had a really good OTAs. If he keeps this up through training camp in the preseason, he's going to make the 53.
Gotcha, and there's obviously gonna be some open spot there, even though, like, Cam Sutton obviously being brought in, you feel like that's the solution for slot corner, but he's gonna miss time. How much time is still kind of up in the air. We feel like we have a blueprint
Right.
for what that looks like with Charles Omenihu last year with 6 games, but, so if we're going based off that for the beginning of the season, there's a lot of snaps in the slot up for grabs right now.
Yeah, and I mean they've spliced up that slot job before where one guy's the rundown and one guy's the pass down. I mean, Beanie could be the
Mhm.
rundown if you really wanted him to be. So he could be a
Sure.
great special teamer. And it's
Yeah.
more likely than not that they keep 6 corners, I think. I think they will keep 6. And I think we know who the top 5 are probably going to be. It's probably going to be JPJ, Dante Jackson, Corey Trice, Darius Rush, and Cam Sutton. But I think number 6 could easily be Beanie Bishop. I also think the fact that Beanie Bishop has played safety gives him a
Mm,
lot of interesting sub-package kind of usage at safety or at the dime backer. So I think he has a chance, man, to use that versatility and lock in a roster spot.
gotcha. Okay. Nick, I want to bring the audience into this conversation, see what kind of questions we got. And then if there's anything that we didn't cover that you wanted to bring up from OTAs, we could certainly circle back to that as well. But I just want to make sure we get through a lot of these. Just Coy, not Coy, not anybody like different Coy. This is just Coy. Wants to know, are there any guys that have been getting more attention than expected by the coaches? This is an interesting question. So maybe somebody that you like thought is kind of flying under the radar, but you're like, oh wow, the coaches seem to be really paying attention to this guy.
I don't think so. Like I know Zach Azzani's been paying a ton of attention to Roman Wilson.
Mm,
Our great photographer Ed Thompson's had a few photos of this,
yeah,
and that's been a big focus of it. They're really grilling him. Pat Myers focusing on Troy Fautanu a lot, and Zach Frazier and Mason McCormick, like expected. Um, I guess the one guy maybe that's a little interesting is how much they focused on Darius Rush. I don't think
mm,
that's like super surprising though. I mean, he's a very high upside guy that is raw coming out of
sure,
South Carolina and has a ton of upside. Um, so I think Darius Rush is a guy that they've paid a lot of attention to. Him and Trice, just because they're young corners that have a lot of upside for them. So I don't think there's really been a surprising name that they paid a lot of attention to this year. Um, it's really been the rookies or these second year guys that have a ton of upside. And
yeah,
no one's really been like, wow, that's like shocking to me at least.
gotcha. Chris Birch says, and this is, I feel like a question we haven't talked about yet. It's actually a two-parter, two very different questions. Najee / Warren snap count prediction. So how much of a timeshare do we see that being? And then he also asked about Peyton Wilson's potential impact. Do we think that he actually is going to see a role this year, or is it going to be more of a red shirt?
So Najee and Warren is going to be interesting because it's OTAs. Najee and Warren basically took very minimal reps
Sure.
because
Mhm.
obviously you don't want the wear and tear on your running backs. Same thing with Cordero Patterson. So it was a lot of, like Aaron Shamplin, Dejan Edwards, Jonathan Ward, LaMichael P. Ryan. So I can't like I'm saying this purely based off vibes and what I feel, not what I have
Mhm.
observed. Um, I think it's gonna be like 52-48, but that's just with those two. I think Cordero Patterson probably steals some snaps in there.
Mhm. Yeah.
Just because he's going to be that running back, kind of wide receiver guy. You can be a gadget player. You can get him out in space on screens. Like you can use him in a lot of different ways. They're going to play multiple running back sets too. So I mean, Najee and Jaylen are going to be on the field at the same time. I think a decent bit. So we'll kind of see. I think Najee will slightly outsnap Warren. I think just because Najee is the built for that, like his
Mhm.
build is obviously the workhorse build. Not that I don't think Warren can do it. I think Warren can do it. I just think Najee, when you look at him, looks like an old school workhorse back that would have played in the 1990s. Like that's what he looks like to me. So he'll
Yeah.
probably get that. As for when you look at Peyton Wilson, I still think he gets a role. Obviously, the special teams is going to be the number one, but I
Mhm.
look at him and think sub package, um, dime, nickel. I threw this out with Alan the other day when we were talking about this, and I know they have that 3-3-5 that they use sometimes, where it's usually 3 outside backers. Last year it was Watt, Highsmith, and Herbig, but before it's
Mhm.
been Bud Dupree and Highsmith, et cetera, et cetera. I think this year Peyton Wilson could be the third linebacker, and I
Mm.
just think because my concern with Peyton Wilson, outside of the durability stuff, has always been he is so versatile. He's sometimes positionless. He didn't play a ton of stack linebacker. So when you get him in rundowns and ask him to sift through the trash or, shed a block from a climbing lineman, it can be an adventure. And sometimes he runs out of gaps and can have some issues there. My for him has always been Isaiah Simmons. I just think he is so
Mhm.
positionless, but that's special too. I think the Cardinals didn't know what to do with Isaiah Simmons a lot of the time. And they kind of put him everywhere. So positionless can be good and bad, but you also look at positionless and it can be good. I think Simmons is a guy that last year in New York found some footing finally, and they kind of just put him where he needed to be. So I need them. For me personally, I would want to use Peyton Wilson's best traits, which are his coverage ability because of his speed, his length, and his fluidity at his size. And then he is an elite blitzer. I think that goes under the radar. He blitzed off the edge a ton on those overload blitzes, and he destroyed running backs and tight ends. That's what they need him to do. That he can be in the nickel on a more passing obvious down. He can be beside Patrick Queen, who is also a great blitzer. They have three great blitzers between Queen, Roberts, and Wilson. And I think they can do so many interesting things with Peyton Wilson, off the stack linebacker coming off the edge, with Watt and Highsmith out there. I just think they can do so many different things with him. So I do think he'll have a role. I don't think he'll start this year,
No.
sans injury, obviously. If an injury happens, he might. But I do think he's going to have a role this year just because he is versatile and he has two really easy skills to plug into the lineup. When you're athletic and can cover and can blitz your tail off, you could throw him in there pretty easily.
There you go. I like it. Very detailed, very good stuff. There you go, Chris Berg. John says, has Zach Frazier been running with ones at all? If not, do you expect that to happen in mini or training camp?
So a little bit, not a ton, but yesterday he
Mhm.
started to mix in a little bit. He started to a little bit, like Troy Fautanu as well has run with the ones a little bit. So Frazier's done it a bit. I do expect that to happen in training camp. I expect Zach Frazier to be the week one starting center for this team. I'm sorry, I get they keep banging the Nate Herbig drum. I can't yet. It's just the athletic profile of an Arthur Smith center does
Mhm.
not fit with what Nate Herbig is. It doesn't even necessarily perfectly fit Zach Frazier, but
Yeah.
he is certainly a better athlete than Herbig. When we were talking about like guys coming out in the draft, we were talking about Barton and Powers Johnson because of how great they are in space.
Right.
Frazier is a little less athletic in that regard, but he is obviously athletic in other regards with how strong he is, with a wrestling background. His ability to actually get out and take great angles, I think, is pretty underrated in space. Even if he's not like this twitched up kind of space guy where he just flies in space. Like Troy Fautanu, for example, is just such a glider in space. He just moves very well. Frazier moves solidly, but isn't like this, oh my goodness, look at him move in space guy. But he takes
Mhm.
such precisely good angles and plays with such great leverage. He usually hits on those. So he should be a guy. If you're going to run wide zone and mid zone a ton, he should be the guy to me. That starts. I don't know how an Arthur Smith offense works, um, running wide zone with Nate Herbig at center. How are you ever going to reach the backer to seal it off? It just feels like you're asking for a bunch of 3-4 yards gains with the front side backer filling in the B gap every time.
Right. I mean, it's kind of how I've taken this whole thing is you're obviously gonna, push the rookie to unseat the vet. But I really feel like once we get into training camp that a lot of the things that you're saying are going to really come to the surface in terms of the warts that you would have with Nate Herbig as the starting center of this offense. So we'll see. We'll go to wow, Omar Khan. Omar at Omar Khan Artist wants to know, how do you expect the CB depth chart to look by week one? I mean, he should be telling us, to be honest, but what do you think?
So I don't think it's going to be that hard to decipher this. I think you have your clear guys. I think your starters on the outside will be Joey Porter and Dante Jackson. I think your slot corner
Mhm.
will be Cam Sutton. If he's suspended, we'll see where that goes. Who the starting slot will be. Right now, my prediction is Beanie Bishop. But we will see how that goes. Outside of that, I think your outside guys are going to be Corey Trice and Darius Rush. And I do think they're going to keep six.
So that's if I was asking this question or like kind of tweaking it, I would ask, who do you think ends up ahead between those two, Rush and Trice?
Rush, maybe. And the reason I say that is not because Trice isn't going to play better than Rush or isn't better than Rush. It's just this early part of this offseason, Trice has been more limited. The knee injury he still looks clunky, and he's going to because he's wearing a
Mm,
massive knee
yeah.
brace. I mean, you can't be fluid with a massive knee brace on, and I think Trice is actually a pretty fluid athlete. It's just he's not going to look fluid when one of his legs has a brace on, still, recuperating from ACL surgery. And so he might be good by like August 7th. By the time that happens, there's a week left in training camp. And so Rush
Mhm.
is just going to have a little bit of a one up on him. I'm interested to see, if Trice can start training camp, full go and ready.
Mhm.
I think that Trice should win that job. I think Trice is the better player, but I do
Okay.
think Rush is going to have more opportunities to put the impact on coaches and kind of see where everything goes. So we'll see. Trice is the better player though to me. So right now, I think I would lean Rush just because I think it's going to have more opportunity. Trice is going to take a while, I think, to get fully up to speed, but I do think Trice is the better player.
Gotcha. Tyler Weeks, who hosts an incredible podcast with a very handsome co-host called Around the 412. Go check that out if you have not in the past. Says pick one to keep. The rest will not happen. You can either view this as most realistic or what you'd rather see / be more beneficial to the team. TJ Watt wins Defensive Player of the Year.
Okay.
Patrick Queen is first team All Pro.
Mm.
Joey Porter Jr. gets an All Pro, whether that's first or second. It says in parentheses first or second team. So which one? This is interesting. Which one do you think would give the Steelers the best chance if that happened?
Hmm.
Like we've seen TJ win Defensive Player of the Year already, and
That's
what the
if we're going by most realistic, that is by far the most realistic, right? I mean, not that Queen and Porter going all pro is crazy out there. But I'm also thinking of
well,
inside
two of
linebacker.
these have happened, right?
Yeah,
I mean, Queen was first. Was he first team All Pro? Or was he second team All Pro last year?
second team.
Okay,
Um,
so only one of them has happened. The other one was close to happening.
yes. So Queen is interesting because I still think there's a crop of linebackers that are so good that's hard to imagine them getting knocked off the peg. Like Roquan Smith and Fred Warner and those guys are almost like shoe-ins to be first team all pros. Doesn't mean that Patrick Quinn can't be. It's just these guys are, Fred Warner and Roquan are on gold jacket trajectories right now. So it's hard to bump them off. Joey, I think, has a chance if he can clean up some of the technical stuff. I really think he has a chance to be there. Corners not like corners are still a very wide open position too. There's a lot of really good corners like Sauce and Turtan and all those guys that are still around. But if Porter
Mhm.
has a great year, I think he can do it. I think TJ is probably the most likely still. I mean, listen, TJ's been there. He was the runner up last year.
Mhm.
He's still extremely productive. He's not slowing down at all. I think TJ winning Defensive Player of the Year is probably the likeliest option. He's obviously got great competition. Your Miles Garrett's going to be there. Michael Parsons is going to be there. Max Crosby's going to be there. You're going to have a ton of guys in there. But I do think that's probably the likeliest. Queen,
So yeah, I agree that TJ is the likeliest. I would pick if I got to just choose one from
I would pick
this.
Joey. If you're from a fan
Same.
perspective, that's what I would pick,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Like,
because I think TJ was still going to be in that mix regardless. Patrick Queen, I still think coming off the year that he did last year is going to be in that mix. So Joey taking that type of leap in year two, I mean, not just for 2024, but going forward. I mean, we already feel really good about what he is as a player. But if he takes that leap in year two, man, I mean, not just for the now, but also for the future, what that would mean for the team.
yeah, I agree with you. I think it could be, actually extremely crazy. Um, how good that defense could be if Joey becomes, a top 5 corner. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
if he's a first team all pro, he's a top 3. So that would be game
Yeah.
changing for this team. So yeah, I think that's the one you would want the most, certainly. I think the likeliest though is TJ, just because he's TJ Watt. I mean, let's be real here. He's at worst, the third best edge rusher in the NFL. I mean, that's depending on what you think of,
Right.
at least to me, he is. I know that people will throw him in the same bag with Crosby and Bosa and Parsons and Garrett. But I really don't see how you can put him any lower than 3, and certainly you can
Mhm.
make the argument for him being 1.
Sure. Nick, I think if I told you that all the rest of the questions were centered basically around the same position, what do
Oh,
you think the people want to know about?
let me guess, wide receiver.
Yeah, so we'll kind of lump all these together. I will go off of Mikey's question here and kind of bring the other ones into the conversation. He said, I know, and then tagged you, even though you already tagged in the original post. We appreciate it, Mikey, making sure that Nick saw this. Has been impressed with Calvin Austin. Do you guys think between him and Roman Wilson, the Steelers already have their number 2, or do you guys think they will eventually pick one up, trade for a number 2? I'll let you answer that, and then, like I said, I'll bring because there's like 4 of the people that were asked about wide receivers. I'll figure out a way to kind of lump those in.
Interesting. So there's a lot of different kind of methods they can go at with this wide receiver question. So because Calvin Austin's been really good, and I do think he'll have a legitimate role in this offense, I am more willing to trust him on that depth chart now. So, I mean, honestly, he could play more than Roman Wilson right now if Roman Wilson doesn't take the trajectory upward. He's been
Mhm.
really good, so he could be the guy running over routes all year. We really are at that. I do think they will eventually try to get it to. I think they want to get it to. We've talked about this so many times about what the reality of the situation is. They've called everybody, Smitty, everybody.
Mm.
They've called about
They
Courtland.
actually called me to see if I had a receiver available for them.
Yeah, right. They've called
Fortunately, I
everybody.
didn't.
They've called. Listen, let's just run down the list. They've called about Ayuk, Jawan Jennings, and Debo Samuel. They've called
Yeah.
about. They called about Cortland Sutton. They called about DK Metcalf. They called about all of these guys. Anyone else that you want to name that has been a top
The te
receiver
the
that has.
the Texans guys,
Yep, they've called the Texans
um,
guys. They've called, about Justin Jefferson. They've called about Devontae Adams. They've
Stephon
called
Diggs
about
before he got traded.
they called about him too. I mean, they've called about
Yeah.
everybody.
Mhm.
So they have called about everybody, and no one's interested right now. I think it's pretty clear that you know the Steelers, for one, didn't want to give up as much in the Diggs stuff. Didn't want to give up that second round pick. Probably that's probably what happened there because we have heard enough, and I've heard enough from the Debo Ayuk stuff that they didn't want to give up a second either. So they want this to be cheap enough to where they don't have to give up a premium pick. Maybe they're waiting it out. And the more time that goes by, there's just no one out there. Slayton has incentives added to his contract. Cortland Sutton showing up to training, mandatory minicamp. Maybe that still happens, but I mean, it's not going to get ugly between those two. It doesn't seem like. Ayuk is the one where it is getting a little bit contentious, but he's also the most expensive. Do the Steelers want to pay him $30 million a year? I think that's the question there.
Right.
So we'll see. I think they're going to add someone at some point. Maybe there's an unforeseen player that we don't know yet, and it's open as a wide receiver too. I don't know. Adam Thielen. I mean, is anyone going to be super excited about that though? At this point in Adam Thielen's career, I'm just throwing names out there at this point. But
Yeah.
um, like it's the Steelers want to get somebody, but it takes two. It takes two to tango. That's where it's at. So we'll see. I think they're going to try and add a wide receiver too. If not, I think their other move is to take an upside swing on somebody. Um, we talked about. I don't know if I talked about it with you, Smitty, but we have talked about how if it comes down to it, late in August, no one comes available. They might have to take an upside swing on a John Mechie, someone like that.
Somebody mentioned John Mechie in this actually, and also lumped in, who was it in the Michael Thomas question? Yeah. Would you prefer signing Michael Thomas or trading a late round pick for John Mechie? Because I was gonna say I'm starting to feel like all this ends up them just circling back on the Michael Thomas stuff that we put out a few weeks, actually probably a month or so ago now at this point. But like if a trade's not there to be made, I wouldn't rule them out. Just giving Michael Thomas another phone call.
I'm sure they're gonna see on that, but Here's the thing about Michael Thomas. There's a lot of questions there. Just is he even, are we even sure he's better than the guys they have, right? I mean, for what he's going to have. The ankle injuries that he suffered, man, are serious injuries. Just he tore his deltoid ligament, which is incredibly hard to do, first of all, and that was a long recovery. He's had re-injuries to it. Last year he was banged up. No matter what you think of Michael Thomas on the field, off the field too, he's a big personality. He definitely is. He's a wide receiver one that still thinks he's a wide receiver one. And so we'll see where that goes. I mean, he's probably better than the guys they have, the Van Jeffersons, the Quet Watkinses, the Scotty Millers. He's probably better than that group. But how much does he want? I think that's another question, how much is this guy asking for? So all of that comes into play. I think if things get really dire, they will give him a call. He's clearly the best player on the market left. I don't think that's a question. He's definitely the best wide receiver out on the free agent market. So I mean, we'll have to see, man. But I'm not. I wouldn't say that's going to be Plan A, B, maybe even that may be Plan E, dude. Like that's how far down. Like that's not going to be Plan A.
So your answer to the other one, you would rather the team trade a late round pick for a John Mechie flyer than sign?
Probably. I really liked Mechie's tape from last year too. Like the limited tape we have of John Mechie last year told me he could be a very good receiver still. He's just unproven. So I think I would love the move of taking a late round swing on John Mechie. I really think there's a good player in there. So I just don't see the playing time for him. They have so many players, but he's young. He's young, and their core is also, with Diggs isn't getting younger. Woods is probably going to be gone, so maybe they want to keep Mechie as like a future chip. I don't really know, but I would like a John Mechie move, yes.
Okay. There we go. My prediction, I don't know if you want to give one, has been that they end up circling back on Michael Thomas. Not that that's necessarily what I want. That is my prediction as we sit here right now.
You think they're going to go circle back and get Michael Thomas?
Yeah.
I don't think they will.
I'm glad that I don't want to be right on this, but all right. Do you want to throw out a prediction for how this shakes out?
A prediction. I think they're going to end up trading for like an upside swing. That's my guess.
Okay. So Mechie. Like somebody of the yeah.
A Mechie type. Could be from anywhere. Who knows? Some of these guys that end up becoming available as trade bait at some points, but that's my guess. I think they're going to take an upside swing. The other one that you could make a really big prediction on, and I think it's becoming likelier just because it looks like it's getting uglier by the day, man. I mean, it feels more likely than I thought it would at this time that the Ayuk thing actually happens. I think the 49ers, man, Pearsall is more like Ayuk than he is like Debo. That's one thing. They've paid a lot of guys. The price for Ayuk has only rose since these negotiations started. And I don't know, did you see the comments from TJ Hushmanzada, who trains?
I did, yeah.
Where he's not optimistic. I mean, we've seen this, turn around. Last year at this time, Debo requested a trade. So, I mean, it could turn around very quickly, but it's becoming likelier to me that actually might happen. We'll see what the Ayuk stuff
is. Specifically to the Steelers? Like, the thing with me is the $30 million.
I just don't know if the Steelers are going to be willing to give up a first-round pick and $30 million.
Right.
Because there's going to be other teams in this conversation. The Patriots are probably going to.
I think it's more likely that Omar would part with the draft pick than they would pay $30 million.
They're not paying anybody on offense, though. That's the issue.
I know, but the reason that specifically it's Ayuk is, and I'm not sure, and this is again a hypothetical, but to me at least, you're also, and maybe they would rather just go forward with Ayuk and just juice whatever you can out of George Pickens, but that closes the door to me on a George Pickens extension.
Though? Why? They're not paying.
I just don't. But they also don't have an answer at quarterback right now. Like, how do you pay two receivers without having?
Do you really think they're going out there and paying Dak Prescott $55 million next year? Like, you think that's what they're going to do? I mean,
No, I would put a better chance of that happening than paying 2 receivers
wow.
that
Okay,
big
that's a
money.
little bold. I would actually think it's likelier that they would go and get both receivers under contract and swing with a rookie at quarterback. I don't really know what their quarterback plan is going to be after this year. They are in a
I don't think
that's
either
another
one's gonna
thing.
happen,
I
but
mean, that's a hard thing too when you're thinking about like trading for Ayuk is like not
yeah,
having a
I brought
certain QB answer is
yeah.
if you have to part with a one and the quarterback class next year looks pretty bad. I mean, just right now we're a year away, but really doesn't look super promising. There's a few guys there, with like Carson Beck and Shador Sanders and a few others. But like it's not a great class. So maybe they'll be more comfortable with it, but I don't know what their plan's going to be at quarterback. But right now, if they wanted to, they can easily pay Ayuk and George. It's not crazy. Um, they're not, especially if they don't pay James Daniels. I mean, that's another big contract that's going to come off the books. Uh, they're going to have a very cost controlled offensive line in that case. Theoretically, I mean, who's going to be the highest paid guy outside of Ayuk if he comes? Pat Freiermuth, probably. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
I think me and Alan have kind of talked about this over the past few weeks. I think a lot of the talk around extensions of who's not getting talked to and who's being a little more quiet on things is lining up with Pat maybe getting an extension. I kind of think so. I
Hey,
just
I have a feeling that if it happens, this site is gonna be the one to break it.
Yeah, I could see that, but I think I could see Pat getting the extension just because Cam and them are so far apart, and they have such big plans for Pat. I can see that happening pretty easily. So we'll see, but I
Yeah.
I I I wouldn't say it's like likely they would pay 2 receivers top dollar because George Pickens is probably gonna get like 25 per year if he has another
Yeah.
really good year.
Right.
But I also think the lack of commitment at quarterback is a reason they might not trade for Ayuk, but it might also just be enough of a reason for them to get him and pay both. It could happen
Yeah,
because
I mean, you could definitely
when when you
talk
don't
yourself
have
into being on either side of that.
right,
Yeah.
when you have cheap quarterback play, you have the ability at that point to make moves that you would not be able to. Just look at the team we're talking about, the 49ers. I mean, they're paying Nick Bosa, Trent Williams, Fred Warner, Shavarius Ward, Christian McCaffrey, Debo Samuel, just signed Jawan Jennings. I mean, they are paying everybody. Javon Hargrave. Everybody is getting paid on that team right now. And it's
Mhm.
not going to happen for much longer because Brock Purdy's going to be getting a bag soon. But when you don't have a certain answer quarterback, it can make you more risk averse. It can also open up the pocketbooks to things you wouldn't usually do. Certainly, it would be against the Steelers' grain just historically to pay 2 receivers insane amounts of money, but
Mhm.
also it's a new era, so we'll see.
We will see. Good conversation as always. Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. We want to know your thoughts on not just that specific topic, but obviously everything that we talked about today. Nick, tell the people where they can find you.
Find me on X at Farabaugh FB. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn on the notification bell, read the stuff over at SteelersNow.com as well.
There we go. And if you are not watching on YouTube, you're listening somewhere else, be sure to leave us a 5-star review over there. Be sure to subscribe over there, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast from. You can find Steelers Afternoon Drive there. So be sure to do that for us. You can find me everywhere, Zachary Smith, PGH. For Nick Farabaugh and myself, thanks for jumping in. Take another ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive.